that thought is back again. You noticed it. You told yourself to stop. And then, a few minutes later, there it was. Same words, same loop, same place you've been 100 times before. You're not losing your mind, but you are so tired of it. You've tried distracting yourself. You've tried staying busy. You've tried telling yourself it doesn't matter anymore. And still, the thought comes back, like it has nowhere else to go, like you're the only place it knows. Not because something is wrong with you, but because no one ever explained why this actually happens. And without that understanding, you keep doing the one thing that makes it worse, without ever knowing that's what you're doing. You've tried to slow down and it didn't last. You've had good days where the loop was quiet, and then it came back anyway. And you started to wonder if this is just how your mind works, if this is just how you are. It's not, and you're not alone in this. Buddhism has understood this pattern for a very long time, and what it says might change how you see your own mind. That's what we're going to explore today. The Buddha once said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." Most people hear that and assume it's about positive thinking. It's not. It's a description of how deeply your mind shapes your entire experience of being alive. Every room you walk into, every conversation you have, every morning you wake up to, every ordinary afternoon that somehow feels heavy anyway. And when your mind is locked inside a loop, that loop becomes your whole world. So let's look at why this actually happens, and more importantly, what you can genuinely do about it. Here's the thing about repeating thoughts. They don't return randomly. You think they do. You think your brain just misfires sometimes, or that you're anxious for no real reason, or that your mind has always been this way and always will be. But every thought that keeps coming back is attached to something unresolved, a feeling you haven't fully allowed yourself to feel, a question you haven't been able to answer, a situation you haven't finished accepting yet. Buddhism calls this pattern samsara, not in the grand cosmic sense right now, in the everyday, practical, this is my actual life sense. Samsara is the cycle, the returning, the going around and around without ever getting anywhere new. And here's what that means for you in real terms. Your mind is not repeating that thought to torture you. It's repeating it because it hasn't found a place to rest. Think about it this way. Imagine leaving a conversation mid-sentence. You walk away from the room, but part of your attention never does. Your brain keeps that thread open like a tab you meant to close. It keeps returning the check. Is this resolved? Have I worked this out yet? Can I finally put this down? And when the answer keeps being no, the tab stays open. The thought returns again and again. Sometimes during a meeting when you're supposed to be focused. Sometimes while you're eating lunch and trying not to think about anything at all. Sometimes at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and you were hoping rest would come. This is not a flaw in your design. This is your mind doing exactly what it was built to do. It is trying to protect you. It is trying to find closure. It is trying, in its own clumsy way, to help. The problem is, some things simply cannot be resolved by thinking harder about them. Some things require a completely different approach, something quieter, something most of us were never taught. And until you understand what's really driving the loop just keeps going. Here's what most people believe without ever questioning it. If I think about this long enough, I'll finally work it out. So you think, and think some more. You replay conversations while driving, You run through different versions of how things could have gone. You argue with yourself in the shower. You rehearse things you should have said years ago to someone who may not even remember the moment. And the thought keeps returning anyway, because thinking about a feeling is not the same as actually letting yourself feel it. This is where Buddhism draws a clear line that most of modern life completely ignores. The Buddha said, "In the sky, there is no distinction of east and west." People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. What he was pointing to is this: we build our own mental frameworks. We label our experiences into categories we can manage. We analyze them from every direction we can think of. We debate ourselves endlessly about what they mean and what we should do. And all of that mental activity can become a sophisticated way of staying at a safe distance from what's really there. It looks like processing. It feels like doing something useful, but it keeps you circling above the feeling rather than ever fully landing in it. The thought keeps repeating because underneath it, there's something that hasn't been fully met. Grief you moved past too quickly because there was no time to stop. Fear you never sat with long enough because it felt too large. Longing you convinced yourself wasn't worth feeling. Something real and human. Something that needed more space than your life could give it at the time. And your mind, in its own persistent way, keeps bringing it back to the surface. Not to make your days harder than they have to be. Not to punish you, but because something is still there. Still waiting, still unmet. The next time that thought repeats, try something genuinely different. Don't answer it. Don't argue with it or explain it away. Notice what feeling comes with it. Where do you feel that in your body? What does it actually feel like beneath the words and the logic? That feeling is the real message your mind has been trying to deliver. The repeating thought is just the envelope it keeps sending, because no one has fully opened it yet. Here's the cycle most of us fall into without realizing it. The thought shows up. You don't want it there. You push it away. It comes back louder. This is not coincidence. Buddhism teaches a concept called upadana. It means grasping, clinging. And here's the part that changes everything when you truly see it. Upadana works in both directions. You can cling to something you want, but you can just as powerfully cling to not wanting something. You can be deeply attached to the absence of a particular thought. In exactly the same way you can be attached to having something you desire. Both are the same motion underneath. Both keep you tethered to the very thing you're trying to escape. When you fight a thought, you give it significance. You tell your entire nervous system, this matters. This is worth my full attention right now. This is something that needs to go. Think about it this way. Imagine someone kept saying your name in a crowded room. If you kept spinning around and saying, "Stop saying my name," the situation never resolves. You are still engaged. You are still responding. You are still making it the loudest thing in the room. Your resistance to the thought is a form of sustained attention aimed directly at it. And your mind reads that attention as confirmation. This must be important. They keep responding to this. Keep raising it. The answer is not to fight harder. The answer is to stop treating the thought like an emergency that has to be resolved right now. Not to agree with everything it tells you. Not to act on every impulse it creates, but to stop giving it the urgency every single time it appears. When you can look at a thought with a little more steadiness, with a little more distance between you and what it's saying, it begins to lose its grip. Not all at once, but it does begin to loosen, and that loosening is the beginning of something real. Here's a small practice for the next time the thought comes. Instead of saying, "I need to stop thinking this," try saying, "I'm thinking this again." Not with judgment, not with frustration, with simple observation. That shift from suppression to acknowledgement is not passive. It is one of the most active things you can do because it changes the relationship. You stop being someone trying to escape a thought. You become someone who can see a thought clearly enough to choose what happens next. That is a completely different position to be in, and it is available to you right now. Here's something that might shift how you relate to all of this. Before you can change your relationship to the loop, it helps to understand what the loop actually is, where it came from, what it was originally trying to do for you. That thought you keep repeating, at some point in your life, it probably served a real and valid purpose. Your mind learned, very likely a long time ago, that this particular way of worrying, this particular pattern of scanning for what might go wrong, this particular loop, kept you alert, kept you ready, kept something painful from catching you off guard. Or at least, that was the conclusion your mind reached at the time, with the understanding it had available. So it kept the system running, even after the original situation was long over, even after the circumstances completely changed around it, even after the loop stopped making any practical sense in the life you're actually living now. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish cleanly between a real threat happening in this present moment and a remembered threat from several years ago. It responds to both with the same urgency, the same familiar tightening, the same mobilization, the same alarm that has become so automatic. You barely notice it as alarm anymore. You just call it Tuesday. Buddhism speaks often about the nature of suffering, not as punishment, not as something external being done to you, but as the mind's own attempt to hold on, to control outcomes before they arrive, to prevent loss by seeing it coming from every direction. You keep repeating the thought because somewhere in your mind there is a belief that as long as you keep thinking about it, you can manage whatever comes. You can stay prepared. Nothing will catch you completely unready. But here's what that actually costs you. Every hour you spend inside the loop is an hour you're not actually here. Not in your body, not in the room you're sitting in right now, not in the relationship right in front of you, not in the conversation your child is trying to start, not in the life that is quietly happening around you, while your mind is somewhere else entirely. The loop feels like responsible preparation, but it is actually a sustained form of absence, a slow, exhausting drift away from the only life you actually have access to, and you deserve to be present for it, all of it. Even the quiet, ordinary, unremarkable parts, especially those. Something is shifting in how you understand this. The thought is not you. The thought is something your mind produces, and you are the one who can observe it happening. This distinction sounds almost too simple, but it changes everything when you actually feel it from the inside. In Buddhist practice, this recognition is the entire foundation of mindfulness. Not emptying the mind, not achieving some permanently peaceful state where nothing difficult ever arises. Just noticing. You notice the thought, you don't chase it, you don't wrestle it, you don't take it apart to find what's wrong with it. You simply see it. Oh, there's that thought again. That small recognition, that slight stepping back from the content of the thought, That is the entire practice. That is all of it. When you observe a thought without fully merging with it, something changes in how it feels. It no longer arrives as absolute reality. It begins to feel more like weather passing through. Some days there is more of it, some days less. Some days it moves through quickly and leaves space behind. But you are not the storm. You are the sky the storm moves through. This is what Buddhism has always pointed toward. Not the elimination of difficult thoughts, but the freedom that comes from not being entirely ruled by them. You can have the thought arise and still choose how to respond. You can hear the loop begin and still decide what you do with the next breath. That space between the thought and your response, that space is where your actual freedom lives. It has always been there, waiting for you to notice it. Each time you catch yourself inside the thought and take that one step back, you are not doing something difficult. You are returning to something that was always yours. The thought can stay. You don't have to make it leave. You don't have to follow it every time it arrives. You can let it be there the way you let traffic be on a road. You hear it. You notice it's there, but you are not required to follow it wherever it goes. That is freedom. Not the absence of thought, but the presence of a you that is larger than any single thought. A you that has always been more than the loop. Here's the part that tends to take the longest to truly settle in. The loop doesn't break because you finally thought it through completely. It doesn't break because you found the right response to say to yourself. It doesn't break because you distracted yourself long enough. It breaks when you stop requiring it to resolve on your timeline. This sounds counterintuitive. Stay with it. When you can sit inside the uncertainty without immediately needing to escape it, when you can hold the unanswered question without it feeling unbearable, when you can let the feeling exist without frantically trying to make it stop, the loop loses its reason for existing. There is nothing left for it to protect you from. The urgency that kept it alive is no longer there. Buddhism has a concept called non-attachment. It is one of the most misunderstood ideas in Buddhist philosophy. Most people assume it means not caring, not feeling, becoming somehow detached from the things and people that matter to you. That is not what it means. Non-attachment means holding things lightly, caring without gripping, feeling without needing every feeling to immediately resolve, including your own thoughts, including your own urgent need for closure right now. You can care deeply about something and still not need it resolved this minute. You can feel genuine grief without needing it gone by morning. You can acknowledge real fear without needing to control every outcome it points toward. When you stop demanding that the thought must resolve itself immediately, you remove the pressure that has been keeping it alive. Consider what it would feel like to sit with an unanswered question without rushing to resolve it, to stay in the not knowing without treating it like an emergency, not as defeat, not as giving up, but as a choice to stop making urgency out of uncertainty. Most of us were taught that unresolved means unfinished, that unanswered means unsafe. But some of the deepest changes in how we see ourselves and our lives don't come from finding the answer. They come from being willing to sit in the not knowing long enough for something more honest to emerge. The grip of this is already loosening. The thought doesn't disappear all at once, but it stops being the center everything orbits. It becomes one thing among many, one cloud in a sky that is much larger than you realized. and you begin to understand that you have always had more sky than you knew, more steadiness than you gave yourself credit for. Every time the thought returns, it can feel like complete failure, like you've made no real progress, like you've gone all the way back to the beginning, like nothing you've tried is counted. But that is not what is happening. The fact that you notice the thought is not the same as being trapped by it. Before, you were inside the loop, and you didn't even know that's where you were. You were the thought entirely. There was no space between you and it. Now there's a part of you that observes, a part that can take a breath and say, there it is again. I can see it. I am not it. That observation is not a small thing. That is the entire foundation on which change is built. Buddhism does not promise a life free of difficult thoughts. It does not promise a mind that only produces peace. It promises something more honest and more useful. It promises that you can move through difficulty with more grace, that you can be present for your own life even in the hard moments, that your relationship to your thoughts can change completely, even when the thoughts themselves take time to quiet. Every time you catch the loop and simply name it, every time you take one breath before reacting, every time you ask what's underneath the thought, instead of fighting the thought itself, you are not starting over. You are building something quietly, one small moment of awareness at a time. The Buddha taught that the path is not made of grand gestures. It is made of small, consistent choices to come back again and again, as many times as it takes, with as much gentleness as you can manage. And that is always enough. It has always been enough. You are further along than you think. Here is what we have moved through together today. 7 things, and really all 7 point to the same place, the same quiet recognition, the same return. Your repeating thoughts are not random. They are not proof that something is broken inside you. They are your mind's persistent attempt to find resolution for something that hasn't been fully met yet. The way forward is not to fight them harder. The way forward is to understand what they have been carrying all along, to stop treating your own awareness as the enemy and start recognizing it as the beginning of something real. The thought keeps coming back because underneath it, there is something waiting to be acknowledged, something waiting to be held with a little more gentleness than you've been able to offer until now. You don't have to resolve everything today. You don't have to arrive anywhere perfect. You just have to notice the loop with slightly more kindness than you did yesterday. That is the whole practice. That is the entire path. And the next time that thought comes back, try a different question. Not, how do I make this stop? Try, what has this been carrying for me all this time? That question might open something that thinking alone was never going to reach, because sometimes the most important shift is not in what you think, but in how you hold the thinking, and you can start holding it differently today. If something in this felt true for you today, if any part of this landed somewhere that needed it, consider subscribing. There is more here for you, and we are only just beginning.